My fiancé announced, "I'm inviting 50 people from my side. You get 10 because your family is small." My family was small because most died in a house fire. I said quietly, "That's not how this works." Then I canceled the wedding and eloped with someone who actually knew my story. I am Jordan, 29, male. Work as a structural engineer in the commercial sector. I deal with stress loads, structural integrity, and identify an exact breaking point of rigid materials for a living. I am used looking for microscopic cracks in concrete foundations and steel beams. I just never in a million years thought I would have to apply that exact same analytical process to the person I was supposed to spend the rest of my life with. Fiancée, 28F, and I had been together for 3.5 years. We had been officially engaged for 8 months when the structural integrity of our entire relationship completely collapsed over an Excel spreadsheet. Before I get into the spreadsheet and the absolute circus that followed, you need one vital piece of context about my life. When I was 12 years old, a massive electrical fire started in the outdated wiring of our family home. It took my parents and my younger sister. I only survived because a neighbor saw the smoke pouring out of the roof, kicked in our heavy wooden front door, and physically dragged me out of the upstairs hallway where I had passed out from smoke inhalation while trying to reach my little sister's bedroom. Since that specific night, my side of the family has consisted entirely of my paternal grandfather, 2 older aunts, and 3 cousins. That is my entire bloodline. It is a quiet, small, and heavily scarred group of people who don't ask for much and just try to stick together. Fiancée knew all of this. She had sat through the quiet, subdued Thanksgiving dinners at my grandfather's house. She had held my hand sitting next to his hospital bed when he had a major cardiac scare 2 years ago. I genuinely thought she understood the immense, suffocating weight of that absence in my life. We were sitting at the kitchen island of my condo on a random Tuesday night. I own the condo outright. I bought it years before we even met, using the remainder of the wrongful death settlement from the fire, would have been held in a strict trust until I turned 25. We were looking at our master wedding guest list on my laptop. We had specifically agreed on a beautiful, historic venue downtown that held a very strict maximum capacity of 60 people. We both said we wanted something intimate. We had also agreed on a firm budget. To get the ball rolling, I had recently transferred $35,000 of my own savings into a newly opened joint checking account specifically earmarked for the wedding vendors. She was supposed to contribute her half, about $15,000, from her personal savings account the following week. I was scrolling through the rows of names on the spreadsheet when I noticed the numbers at the bottom didn't align with our previous discussions at all. "You have 52 names on here," I said, pointing at the glowing screen. "The venue holds exactly 60 people by fire code. We have the photographer and the wedding coordinator eating a meal, so that leaves 58 actual seats. If you take 52, I only have 6 spots on my entire side." Fiancée didn't even bother to look up from scrolling on her phone. I know. I had to add a few of my mother's friends from the tennis club, and my 3rd cousins from out of state said they really wanted to come, so I had to put them down. We agreed to split the list right down the middle. I said calmly, trying not to jump to conclusions. 30 and 30. We can just cut a few of the plus ones you added for people who aren't even in serious relationships. She sighed. It was the kind of heavy, exaggerated, dramatic sigh you give a toddler who isn't grasping a very simple concept. "Look, I need 50 spots. I am inviting 50 people from my side. You get the rest. It really isn't a big deal." "That leaves me with less than 10 spots," I replied, my voice tightening just a fraction. "I have my grandfather, my 2 aunts, my 3 cousins, and my 3 groomsmen. That is 10 right there. I haven't even added childhood friend or any of my college roommates who I've known for a decade." Fiancée finally set her phone down on the granite counter. She looked at me with an expression of mild annoyance, completely and utterly devoid of any empathy. "Why are you making this a massive deal? You get 10 spots because your family is small anyway. It's not like you have a massive list of people to invite since the fire. Just bring your grandfather and your aunts and be done with it. You really don't need your college friends there. They'll just drink too much and be loud. My family is huge and very close-knit. They actually expect to be hosted properly, and my parents would be so embarrassed if we didn't invite the club members." The room went completely, terrifyingly silent. The low hum of the refrigerator suddenly sounded like a jet engine in the quiet condo. I just stared at her. I didn't feel anger right away. I felt a cold, deep, expanding hollow in my chest. She hadn't just pointed out my lack of family. She had casually weaponized the absolute worst, most traumatic night of my entire life to justify giving her mother's random tennis friends a seat over people who had literally kept me alive and sane. I looked at the screen. Then I looked back at her face, which was still set in a mask of entitled irritation. I closed the laptop. The sharp click of the plastic casing echoed in the quiet kitchen. "That is not how this works," I said quietly. "What do you mean?" she asked, her brow furrowing in genuine confusion. "I am just being practical about the numbers. You simply don't have the people to justify taking up half a venue. It's just a fact." "I mean, the wedding is off," I said. I stood up from the bar stool. I walked over to the hallway closet, pulled out her overnight duffel bag, brought it back to the kitchen, and set it on the stool next to her. "Pack the things you need for tonight. You can come back for the rest of your stuff this weekend when I am not here." She laughed. It was a short, breathy, mocking sound of total disbelief. "You are canceling our entire wedding over a stupid guest list? Are you actually insane?" "I am canceling the wedding because you just used my dead parents and my dead little sister as a logistical convenience to invite your mother's country club friends," I said. My voice never raised a single decibel. I kept it dead level, completely detached. I will not marry someone who views my family's tragedy as a vacant seat at a dinner table. Leave. She spent the next hour absolutely losing her mind. She alternated between screaming at the top of her lungs, fake crying with no tears, and trying to bargain with me to just let her have 40 spots. I sat on the living room couch and stared straight ahead at the dark television screen until she finally realized I was not going to break or argue back. She angrily packed a bag and stormed out, slamming the heavy front door hard enough to rattle the picture frames on the wall. I genuinely thought that was the worst of it. I thought the absolute worst part of this entire ordeal was the raw heartbreak of realizing the woman I loved was entirely devoid of a soul or moral compass. I was so incredibly wrong. The real, unadulterated nightmare started the very next morning at the bank. I took the morning off work to start untangling our wedding logistics before any deposits were locked in. My very first stop was a local branch of our bank to formally freeze the joint checking account and move my $35,000 back into my personal, secure account. I sat down at a desk with personal banker, handed over my driver's license, and explained I needed to close the joint account immediately due to a separated relationship. The banker typed on his keyboard for a moment, clicked his mouse a few times, and frowned deeply, leaning closer to his monitor. "Sir, I can certainly close the account for you today, but there are currently insufficient funds to issue a cashier's check for the amount you just mentioned." "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart doing a strange flutter. I wired exactly $35,000 from my personal savings into that joint account exactly 9 days ago. No vendors have been paid yet. We hadn't signed the final contracts. The banker turned his flat-screen monitor toward me so I could see it. The current available balance is exactly $4,200. There were 3 very large outgoing wire transfers made over the past 4 days. I leaned in, my eyes scanning the screen. It showed 3 outbound wires, one for $10,000, one for $15,000, one for $5,800. They were all sent to an external, out-of-state bank account registered to a commercial LLC that I did not recognize at all. Who authorized these wires? I asked, the blood in my veins turning to absolute ice. The other account holder, the banker said gently, pointing to the transaction metadata. They were initiated and verified through a mobile banking app using 2-factor authentication. I walked out of that bank holding printed, stamped copies of the entire transaction history. I sat in my car in the parking lot, turned on the AC because I was suddenly sweating through my shirt, and pulled out my phone. I searched the exact name of the mysterious LLC through the state's public corporate registry database online. The registered agent and sole proprietor for the LLC was future brother-in-law, fiancé's older brother. She hadn't just insulted my dead family to my face. She had systematically stolen over $30,000 of my settlement money to secretly funnel to her brother. I drove straight to the mid-rise office building where Fiancée worked as a mid-level manager in a corporate HR department. I parked in the visitor lot and waited in the glass lobby until she finally came down for her lunch break. When she stepped out of the elevator and saw me standing there, she looked incredibly smug. She crossed her arms, probably assuming I was there to grovel, apologized for overreacting the night before, and begged her to come back. I didn't say a word. I just pulled the folded bank statements out of my jacket pocket and handed them directly to her. Her smug expression evaporated instantly. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking sickly pale. "Where's my money?" I asked, keeping my voice low but incredibly firm. She looked around the busy lobby nervously, grabbing my elbow and trying to pull me toward a quiet corner near the vending machines. "Keep your voice down. People know me here. I can explain everything. It's really not what it looks like." "Explain it right now," I said, yanking my arm out of her grip. She crossed her arms again, adopting a highly defensive, ridiculously entitled posture. My brother got into some major trouble. He made some really bad investments, and he owed a lot of money to some people who were threatening to put a lien on his house. He has a wife and 2 young kids. I couldn't just sit there and let my nieces be homeless. I was going to put the money back before the big vendor payments were due. My annual corporate bonus hits next month, and I was going to use that. "Your annual bonus is $5,000, I said, having literally seen her previous tax returns when we filed together. "You stole $30,000 of my money, the money from my family's death settlement. You gave it to your brother to pay off his massive gambling debts." I knew he gambled. He talked about sports betting and offshore apps constantly at their loud, chaotic family dinners. "It is not stealing," she hissed at me, her eyes flashing with indignant rage. "It was a joint account. Legally, my name is on it, so I have full access to it. And we were going to be family in a few months anyway. Family helps family when they are in need. You wouldn't understand that basic concept because you don't actually have a real family to protect." There was again the absolute, unyielding refusal to see me as a human being worthy of basic respect, coupled with a staggering level of entitlement to my personal tragedy fund. "I want the entire amount back in my account by Friday at noon," I said, staring right through her. "And I want the engagement ring back today. Right now." She scoffed loudly. She actually rolled her eyes at me in the middle of her office lobby. "You canceled the wedding. Not me. I am keeping the ring. It is a gift and it's mine. And my brother absolutely does not have the liquid cash to give you back right now. You have plenty of money left over from your little tragic payout anyway. Stop being so incredibly greedy and selfish over a few $1,000s. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I didn't cause a scene. I just turned around and walked straight out of the building. When you deal with structural engineering, you learn a very important lesson early on. When a massive building is fundamentally compromised at the foundation, you do not try to patch it with duct tape and fresh paint. You bring in the heavy machinery, and you completely demolish it down to the absolute bedrock. I went home, packed all of her remaining belongings into garbage bags, and dumped them on the front porch. I called a locksmith and paid double the premium rate to have every single lock on my condo changed within the hour. Then I called my boss and told him I needed the rest of the week off for a severe, unforeseen personal emergency. After that, I called Lawyer. Lawyer was a terrifying, absolute bulldog of a civil litigator who had masterfully handled the final, complex disbursements of my trust a few years prior. He was expensive, but he was ruthless. I sat in his plush leather office chair for 3 hours, handing over the stamped bank statements, the LLC public registry prints, the text messages from the night before, and the original jeweler's receipt for the $14,000 custom engagement ring. Lawyer carefully looked over the paperwork, took off his reading glasses, and looked at me with a sharp, calculating glint in his eye. She is banking heavily on the fact that joint account holders generally have equal, unfettered access to deposited funds. But she used those specific funds for a secret, non-marital purpose that solely benefited a third party, entirely depleting your specific, traceable deposit before any commingling could occur. We have a rock-solid, incredibly strong case for civil theft, conversion, and a gross breach of fiduciary duty. As for the ring, the specific state strictly views engagement rings as conditional gifts. The condition of a legal marriage was not met. It does not legally matter who broke off the engagement or why. The ring belongs entirely to the purchaser. We will file an immediate replevin action to legally seize it from her possession. Draft it, I said without a second of hesitation. Draft all of it. I want every single cent back, and I want them to feel it. While lawyer was aggressively drafting the massive stack of complaints, Fiancée and her highly entitled family decided to launch a vicious, preemptive strike against me. They realized very quickly that I wasn't backing down and just accepting the theft, so they decided to completely destroy my personal and professional reputation to force my hand and make me drop the issue. On Thursday morning, as I was drinking my coffee, my doorbell rang. I checked the security camera on my phone. It was Fiancée. She was aggressively yanking on the front door handle, realizing the locks had been changed. She started kicking the bottom of the door, screaming that she needed to get inside to get her expensive winter coats and her jewelry. She didn't realize I had already boxed all of her actual belongings up, but had intentionally held back her expensive electronics and designer bags as collateral until the police told me otherwise. I didn't answer. She eventually gave up and stomped away, keying the side of my mailbox on her way out. An hour later, my phone started exploding with rapid-fire messages from mutual friends. Future mother-in-law had posted a massive, rambling, unhinged essay on Facebook. She publicly tagged me, my 2 aunts, and several of my college friends. The public post claimed that I was a deeply manipulative, abusive narcissist who had been actively cheating on her sweet, innocent daughter for months with multiple women. It claimed that I abruptly canceled the wedding to run off with my secret mistress, and that I had maliciously drained their joint wedding savings account, leaving her poor daughter completely destitute and drowning in thousands of dollars of vendor cancellation fees. She ended the post by calling me a dangerous, unstable sociopath who uses his tragic past to emotionally manipulate women into feeling sorry for him. It was an absolute masterclass in psychological projection and targeted character assassination. Several mutual friends blocked my number immediately. A few texted me asking how I could possibly do such a horrific thing to such a nice family. I didn't reply to a single one of them. I took high-resolution screenshots of every single post, every comment validating her lies, and every share. I emailed the entire batch directly to lawyer's paralegal. But future mother-in-law didn't stop at a simple Facebook smear campaign. She decided to go straight for my livelihood. On Friday morning, I got a frantic, highly unusual call from boss. He asked me to come into the main corporate office immediately, sounding incredibly tense. When I arrived, the head corporate HR director was sitting in boss's office, looking incredibly stern. We received a very concerning, anonymous phone call on our corporate ethics hotline this morning. Boss said, looking highly uncomfortable and refusing to make eye contact. A woman, who later identified herself as your future mother-in-law, claimed that you have been systematically stealing high-end CAD software licenses and highly proprietary, classified structural blueprints from our secure servers. She claimed you are illegally selling them to our overseas competitors to fund a massive, secret underground gambling addiction. I just sat there and stared at him. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of the lie was actually breathtaking. She literally took her own son's pathetic gambling addiction and blatantly projected it onto me, wrapping it in a severe corporate espionage accusation to try and get me permanently fired and blacklisted from my industry. Are you auditing my secure workstation? I asked, keeping my voice steady. We have absolutely no choice, the HR director said, shifting in her seat apologetically. Any formal accusation of intellectual property theft mandates a full, comprehensive IT sweep of your hardware and an immediate suspension with pay until a third-party investigation is fully concluded. You have to hand over your badge and your company laptop right now. Do the sweep? I said, handing over my badge without a fight. You will find absolutely nothing but concrete stress analyses and pictures of my grandfather's garden. But I need you to document exactly what she said on that phone call word for word, and I need a certified copy of the hotline audio recording. I am actively pursuing severe civil litigation against this woman and her entire family for felony-level embezzlement. Boss, who had known me for 6 years and intimately knew my intense work ethic, looked relieved but incredibly exhausted by the drama. I'll get IT on it right away. Just, please get this sorted out quickly. You're my best engineer. I left the office, completely stripped of my daily routine, and drove straight back to Lawyer. I practically threw the notes from the HR meeting onto his desk. Lawyer read them and smiled. It was a terrifying, cold, predatory smile. She just handed us the absolute keys to the kingdom. Posting wildly on Facebook is one thing, but making knowingly false reports of criminal conduct and severe professional malfeasance to your direct employer is textbook defamation per se in this state. You don't even have to prove actual financial damages. The law automatically assumes them because the accusations are so severe. But in this specific case, you were actually suspended from your job, which means your professional reputation and your livelihood have been tangibly negatively impacted. We are going to bury them. By Monday morning, the heavy machinery finally arrived at Fiancée's doorstep. Lawyer didn't just mail the demand letters. He hired a private, highly aggressive process server who specialized in making a scene. Fiancée was served directly at her office desk, right in front of her entire HR department and her direct supervisor. She was physically handed a massive, terrifying lawsuit for conversion, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty, demanding the immediate return of the $30,800, plus all legal fees and punitive damages. She was also served with the emergency replevant action for the engagement ring, which legally forbade her from selling, altering, or hiding the jewelry. Future mother-in-law was served at her exclusive country club while having a lavish lunch with the exact same friends she had prioritized over my family on the guest list. She was handed a brutal cease and desist letter, a strict preservation of evidence demand regarding her social media accounts, and a finalized draft complaint for defamation per se and tortious interference with employment, demanding a full public retraction within 24 hours or the suit will be officially filed in Superior Court, making it public record. Future brother-in-law was served at a suburban home, right in front of his wife, with a heavy subpoena for all of his personal bank records, his LLC's financial statements for the past 3 years, and a formal notice of deposition regarding the stolen funds. The carefully crafted illusion of their perfect, highly respectable, close-knit family shattered into a million pieces instantly. Tuesday night, my doorbell rang aggressively. I checked the camera. It was future brother-in-law. He looked absolutely furious, sweating heavily through his tight polo shirt. He was banging on the door with a closed fist, shouting my name and demanding I come outside and fight him. Like a man, he yelled that I was ruining his marriage because his wife found out about the gambling debts from the subpoena. I didn't open the door. I didn't even go near it. I picked up my phone, dialed 911, and calmly reported a highly hostile, erratic trespasser aggressively trying to force entry into my home. The police arrived within 7 minutes with their lights flashing. I watched safely through the front window as 2 large officers quickly detained him on my front lawn, pushing him against the hood of their cruiser. I stepped outside just long enough to officially tell the officers I wanted him formally trespassed from the property. They ran his ID, found out he had some outstanding traffic warrants, handed him a formal trespass warning, and told him bluntly that if he returned or even drove past my street, he would be arrested on the spot. He glared at me from the sidewalk, his pathetic entitlement completely and utterly neutered by the very real presence of law enforcement. The intense legal pressure cooker did exactly what Lawyer designed it to do. It forced them all into a small room. For agonizing weeks later, my IT audit had come back completely clean. I was reinstated at work with a massive apology from corporate, and we finally met for a mandatory pre-trial settlement conference at a neutral mediator's office downtown. I sat perfectly still on one side of a long, polished mahogany table with Lawyer. On the exact opposite side sat Fiancée, future mother-in-law, future father-in-law, future brother-in-law, and their incredibly stressed, incredibly sweaty defense attorney. This was the very first time the parents were hearing the actual, verifiable truth with receipts. Fiancée and her brother had lied to them for a month. They had fed them a story that I backed out of the wedding, took all the joint money for myself, and was now suing them out of pure, unhinged spite. Lawyer didn't waste a single second of our expensive time. He slid a massive 4-inch thick binder across the table. This binder contains the official, subpoenaed IP logs from the bank, showing your daughter actively transferring $30,000 of my client's trust money into a dummy LLC owned solely by your son, lawyer said, looking directly and piercingly at future father-in-law. It contains the subpoenaed financial records, showing your son immediately routing those stolen funds to 3 different, illegal offshore sports betting platforms within 24 hours. It also contains the official certified IT audit from my client's employer, completely clearing him the fabricated, highly defamatory accusations your wife maliciously made his boss in an attempt to ruin his career. Future father-in-law, a rigid, proud, incredibly stubborn man who ran a successful local hardware business and valued his reputation above all else, picked up the binder with shaking hands. He read the first 3 pages of the bank transfers. His face turned an alarming, dangerous shade of purple. He looked slowly at his son. You told me you desperately needed a short-term loan for new inventory for your business. You lied to my face. Future brother-in-law just stared blankly at the table, sweating profusely, absolutely refusing to make eye contact with the man who had funded his life. Future father-in-law then slowly turned his head and looked at Fiancée. And you actively stole from the man you were preparing to marry to cover for his pathetic gambling addiction? And then you just sat there and let your mother call his boss and lie to the police? Dad, you don't understand. He wasn't going to miss the money. He has this huge settlement from the fire. Fiancée started, her voice shaking, somehow still blindly clinging to her delusional, sickening entitlement. Shut your mouth right now, her father snapped. It was the absolute loudest I had ever heard the man speak in 3 years. He turned to their defense attorney, looking utterly defeated. What are their exact terms? Lawyer leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. He outlined the demands with surgical precision. First, the immediate, physical return of the engagement ring today. Second, a legally binding, non-dischargeable repayment plan for the exact sum of $30,800, heavily secured by a primary lien against the daughter's vehicle and a secondary lien against the son's primary residence. If they miss a single payment, we seize the assets. Third, a written public apology posted directly to the mother's main Facebook account, expressly retracting all previous statements, admitting they were completely false, and apologizing for the defamation, to remain pinned to the very top of her public profile for 30 continuous days. If every single one of these terms is not met and signed by the end of the session, we proceed directly to a very public trial on all civil counts, and I will personally forward the corporate IT audit and the hotline audio, recording to the local district attorney, to formally pursue criminal charges for filing a false police report and severe corporate harassment against the mother. They had absolutely zero leverage. Their own lawyer looked at them, sighed heavily, and nodded grimly, signaling they had absolutely no choice but to take the brutal deal to avoid jail time and total public ruin. Fiancée, with trembling hands, reached deep into her expensive designer purse, pulled out the velvet ring box, and slid it across the long table. She wouldn't even look in my direction. She looked completely, utterly broken. But I knew it wasn't from genuine remorse. It was purely from the sting of facing severe consequences, and the sheer humiliation of being caught and exposed as a thief in front of the father she idolized. Future mother-in-law was crying silently into a tissue, realizing her pristine, heavily curated country club reputation was about to be completely obliterated by her own forced, highly public confession. They signed a mountain of paperwork. Every single page. Every single initial. I walked out of that office building into the bright sunlight, feeling lighter than I had in months. I had my money legally secured. I had my professional and personal reputation completely cleared, and I had successfully surgically excised a massive, toxic infection from my life before it could take root and destroy my future. During those brutal, exhausting weeks of intense legal warfare, one specific person had consistently stepped up to help me keep my sanity totally intact. Childhood friend 29F. I had known her since we were tiny kids running around in the old neighborhood. She was the one who used to come over after school and play silly video games with my little sister for hours. She was physically at the hospital the night of the fire. She sat rigidly in the sterile waiting room with her parents while the trauma doctors worked on me. She knew the entire horrific story because she literally lived through the massive shockwave of it alongside me. When the insane Facebook smear campaign happened, childhood friend was the only person in our entire mutual social circle who didn't text me asking for a complicated explanation. She just showed up unannounced at my condo with 2 large pepperoni pizzas, a 6-pack of dark beer, and a massive stack of cardboard moving boxes to help me finally pack up the rest of Fiancée's belongings to drop off at a neutral location. She helped me organize the massive timelines and text message screenshots for the lawyer. She sat on my couch late into the night and just listened to me vent when the sheer rage and betrayal got way too heavy to carry alone. She never once judged me. She never offered cheap, hollow platitudes. She just offered solid, unwavering, comfortable presence. Over the next long year, as the monthly, forced repayment checks from Fiancée's vehicle lien rolled into my account, my relationship with childhood friends slowly shifted. It wasn't a sudden, cinematic, dramatic spark. It was a slow, organic, beautiful realization that I never once had to explain my silence to her. I never had to justify my small, quiet family to her. She already knew the names and the faces of the people who weren't sitting at the table. We started dating very quietly. No massive announcements, no grand social media posts demanding attention. Just 2 adults building a quiet, structurally sound, incredibly happy life together. 14 months after that disastrous, life-altering kitchen argument over a spreadsheet, I asked childhood friend to marry me. We didn't want a circus. We didn't want a spreadsheet. We just wanted each other. We rented a massive, beautiful, secluded log cabin way up in the Blue Ridge Mountains. We hired a local, laid-back officiant. The guest list was exactly 8 people. Me, childhood friend, my grandfather, my 2 aunts, her parents, and her older brother. It was absolutely perfect. There was no stress, no bitter arguing over expensive catering, no forced catering to distant, entitled relatives. We stood on the expansive back deck of the cabin overlooking the deep valley, the autumn leaves turning brilliant shades of gold and red, and we made our promises to each other. We spent the entire evening drinking good wine around a massive, crackling stone fireplace, laughing until our sides hurt and telling old stories. It was the warmest, safest I felt in a home since I was 12 years old. We had hired a fantastic, highly recommended local photographer to capture the weekend. A few days later, the photographer emailed us a few sneak peek edits of the ceremony. There was one specific photo of childhood friend and me standing under a massive, ancient oak tree, holding hands, laughing uncontrollably at something my grandfather had yelled from a porch. It was pure, unfiltered, authentic joy. Childhood friend posted it on her Instagram, and I shared it on my Facebook, simply captioning it, "Built on solid ground. Marry my absolute best friend." I hadn't actually blocked Fiancée on Facebook. I had intentionally left her unblocked so she could vividly see me monitoring the forced, humiliating public apology her lawyer made her post months prior. After the 30 days were up, I had simply muted her profile, so I wouldn't see her feed, but she could still see mine. Less than 2 hours after I posted that single elopement photo, my phone buzzed on the center console. I had a missed call and a new voicemail from an unsaved local number. I listened to it on speakerphone while childhood friend and I were driving back down the winding mountain roads toward home. It was Fiancée. Her voice was totally frantic, breathless, and heavily laced with a toxic, pathetic mix of deep jealousy and entirely unresolved, staggering entitlement. I saw the picture. The voicemail hissed through the car speakers. "You actually married her? After you completely destroyed my family? My dad won't even speak to my brother anymore. They haven't talked in a year. I had to sell my car to a dealership just to pay off your stupid lien, so I wouldn't get sued again. You completely ruined my life over a stupid guest list, and now you're just playing happy family with someone else? You really are a sociopath. You." I reached over and casually hit delete. The automated voice cut her off mid-sentence. Message deleted. I rolled the car window down, letting the crisp, clean mountain air completely fill the cabin. I looked over at my beautiful wife, who was smiling softly and changing the radio station to find a good song. I didn't destroy her family. Their own staggering entitlement, endless deceit, and selfish greed did that all on its own. They built a massive house on a foundation of lies and stolen money, and they were completely shocked when the foundation finally, inevitably gave way. I just firmly refused to be buried in the rubble with them. Sometimes, the absolute best revenge isn't just getting your stolen money back or publicly clearing your good name in a legal setting. The best revenge is simply proving that your life is infinitely better without them dragging you down and letting them watch you walk away into a bright future they desperately tried to steal. Hit that subscribe button if you prefer your life's foundations built on solid honesty, and leave a comment below if you think the brother Shady Bookie is still actively looking for him.